Okay, gotta confess something. Remember that time I tried learning Italian? I basically memorized the dictionary.
Yeah.
Didn't quite make me like a smooth-talking Roman. It turns out fluency, it's not about like cramming words in your brain. It's about actually using them, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're diving into today. We're tackling stop over-memorizing. Subtitle, The Surprising Shortcut to Fluency. And trust me, this deep dive, it might totally change how you think about learning languages.
Yeah, it's really interesting how we often get stuck in that memorization thing.
Yeah,
Like, think about it. Did you learn your first language by, like, drilling flashcards?
right. No.
Of course not.
All right.
You learn through constant, back and forth, picking up words and phrases, just in context.
Like learning to
Right.
cook, right? You wouldn't just memorize recipes. You'd
Right.
get in the kitchen, like experiment.
Exactly. And that's where the usual way of learning languages kind of goes wrong. It traps language in what we call passive memory. You might recognize a word, but can you actually use it in a conversation without even thinking?
Right.
Probably not.
So we end up with this like mental dictionary, but no idea how to actually use the words.
Right.
So what's the other way then?
The book highlights the power of active learning
Yeah.
and real-world interaction. So instead of memorizing like verb conjugations just by themselves, pay attention to how people actually use those verbs, like in podcasts or movies.
So like observing and absorbing the language organically.
Yeah.
Instead of like rigid rules, we should be looking for patterns
Yeah,
and understanding how it flows, in real talk.
precisely. And one technique the book emphasizes is shadowing, mimicking a native speaker, their pronunciation, their rhythm, how their voice goes up and down, almost like an actor taking on a new role.
So are you saying I should like narrate my day with a dramatic Italian accent?
Well, that could be fun practice. But the core idea is to train your brain to think and speak in the language more naturally. You could shadow along with podcasts, audiobooks, even YouTube videos.
This sounds so much more like fun than flashcards. And speaking of engaging, if you're digging this deep dive, hit that like button and subscribe, for more cool explorations.
Yeah. And while you're at it, think about how you can use some of these techniques yourself. What small steps can you take, like today, to shift away from passive memorization and towards actually interacting with the language?
Great point. Maybe try watching a foreign film with subtitles or finding a language partner online. Doesn't have to be huge, just like small, consistent steps. Now, the book also talks about, embracing mistakes as part of learning. I got to admit, that's tough for me.
Yeah.
Like, I struggle with that.
It's a common thing, thinking mistakes are bad, but actually, they're super valuable feedback. Every time you stumble, you're finding a gap in your knowledge, and that gives you something to work on.
So instead of getting discouraged, we should be like analyzing our mistakes and seeing what we can learn.
Exactly. And this connects to another key point from the book, the importance of actually talking. Memorization might make you a student, but conversation makes you a speaker.
That's a great distinction. It's not about how much grammar we know,
Right.
but how well we can communicate.
Exactly. And that's where a lot of traditional language learning falls short. It focuses on memorizing, not on actual use.
Okay, so how do we make that shift? From student to speaker, I mean, it can be scary to jump into conversations when you're not confident.
It's about finding chances to use the language in real life, even if it feels a little awkward at first.
Yeah.
Order your coffee in the language.
Right.
Chat with another learner online. Heck, even just narrate your day to yourself in your head.
So it's about creating those real-world immersive experiences,
Yes.
even if we're not like living in another country.
Exactly.
Instead of waiting for the perfect moment, we have to like create those moments.
Absolutely. And as you do it more, that fear will start to fade.
I'm seeing how fluency isn't about being perfect. It's about building confidence, embracing those mistakes, and finding joy in, communicating.
You got it. And this leads us to another interesting thing the book discusses.
Okay, I'm all ears. What else does this deep dive have in store?
It's the idea that when we focus on real-world interaction, we not only learn the language better, but we also, get a deeper understanding of the culture.
That makes sense. Language and culture, they're totally connected, right?
Yes.
But I never thought about how the way we learn a language could affect that understanding.
It's like trying to understand a painting by only looking at one tiny part.
Huh.
You might see the brush strokes, the colors, but you're missing the whole picture, the impact.
So when we get stuck in memorizing grammar rules and word lists, we're missing the bigger picture,
Yeah.
the cultural context, the stuff that gives the language real meaning.
Precisely. And one of the best ways to get that cultural immersion, the book suggests, is by experiencing authentic content. Books, movies, music, even social media. Stuff created by native speakers.
So surrounding ourselves with the language in its, like, natural habitat.
Exactly. Not just taking it apart, but experiencing it fully formed.
So how do we, like, as language learners, actually do that? It's easy to say immerse yourself, but what are some real steps we can take?
The book talks about actively looking for ways to connect with the native speakers, even if you don't live where the language is spoken.
I can imagine that feeling overwhelming for a beginner.
Right?
What are some ways to find those connections without feeling, like, lost?
There are tons of options now. Online language exchange platforms are great. You connect with people all over who are learning your language too.
Like a global language learning party.
Exactly. And don't forget about local stuff. Language meetups, cultural centers, libraries, they often have events and classes.
It's about being proactive, finding those pockets of culture right where we are.
Exactly. And as you get comfortable, maybe try a virtual cooking class taught by a native speaker. Or join an online book club discussing books in the language.
I love those ideas. They take language learning beyond the textbook.
Yeah.
Make it more engaging, more like a whole experience.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to become an expert on every bit of the culture. It's about being curious, appreciating the little things that make each language unique.
It's like seeing the world through a different lens.
Yeah.
Understanding there are different ways of, like, expressing ourselves and experiencing things.
Beautifully put. Now, shifting gears a bit, the book also talks about mindset.
Okay, how does our mindset play into language learning?
It says that one of the biggest things holding us back from fluency is fear of making mistakes.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Yeah.
That hesitation before speaking, worrying about messing up the grammar or pronunciation.
It's a common thing, but the book encourages us to see mistakes differently.
So instead of failures, we should see them as opportunities to grow.
Exactly. Every mistake is a chance to learn, to get better. It's like a signpost, showing you the right way.
So instead of getting bummed out, we should analyze those mistakes and see what they're teaching us.
Precisely. And this ties back to what we talked about before, real-world interaction. The more we put ourselves out there, the more chances we have to make those valuable mistakes.
It's about accepting that learning is messy.
Yeah.
Fluency doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Perfect analogy. And like any journey, there will be bumps. But those bumps are what help us grow.
So it's not about avoiding mistakes completely. It's about learning how to deal with them.
Exactly. And that needs a change in mindset. From fear to curiosity. Instead of what if I mess up, it's what can I learn from this?
That's such a, like, empowering way to approach it. It takes the pressure off being perfect.
Yeah.
Lets us enjoy the process.
And that enjoyment is super important for sticking with it. When we're having fun, we're motivated, we're more likely to keep going and reach our goals.
So it's not just about the language. It's about developing a, like, growth mindset, something we can use in any part of life.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another point the book raises, the importance of finding your own voice within the language.
I love that. It's about going beyond just copying native speakers,
Yeah.
expressing ourselves authentically.
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting.
All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive, into stopover memorizing. We've been exploring how to ditch those flashcards and, like, actually use the language, And I gotta say, this has been pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, it really makes you rethink the old ways of learning languages, doesn't it? And a
Yeah.
big idea that comes up in the book is, finding your own voice within the language you're learning.
That's interesting. I've always tried to, like, sound just like a native speaker, but I never thought about bringing my own, like, personality, my own style to the language.
It's like learning, say, a musical instrument. You wouldn't just copy other musicians note for note, right? Eventually, you'd want to use your own creativity, express yourself through the music.
So instead of trying to reach this, like, perfect native-like fluency, which is probably impossible,
Right.
we should be focusing on our own way of speaking.
Exactly. The book says that's where true fluency is, actually. Being able to communicate in a real way, connect with people personally.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh.
I've definitely noticed when I'm too focused on grammar, I end up sounding, like, robotic,
It's like you're wearing a mask. You're speaking, but not really expressing yourself.
So how do we take off the mask, so to speak? Is it just about letting go of that fear of making mistakes.
That's a big part of it, yeah. The book really emphasizes embracing those mistakes. It's crucial.
Yeah, we've touched on that before, but it's worth repeating.
Yeah.
Mistakes are not failures. They're like valuable lessons, right?
Yeah.
They help us grow.
Exactly. And when we stop being scared of them, then we can experiment. Find what feels natural, what feels like us in the language.
Like giving ourselves permission to play, right?
Yeah.
To try new things, be creative, have fun with it.
Exactly. And that playfulness, that's so important for fluency. When we're enjoying it, we're more likely to stick with it and actually make progress.
This makes me think of the times I felt most fluent. It's always when I'm relaxed, having a conversation I care about, and not like obsessing over every little mistake.
It's in those moments your true voice comes out.
So it's not just about the mechanics, the rules. It's about that feeling of ease, confidence
Yeah.
that lets you express yourself freely.
You got it. And the book has some practical tips on how to do this.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Sure.
What can we do to like boost our confidence, find our voice in another language?
One thing is focus on your message, what you're trying to say. Don't get hung up on every little grammar detail.
So meaning over perfection.
Exactly. Think about how you talk in your own language.
Right.
Do you always speak in perfect sentences?
Of course not.
No. You pause, use gestures. You might even leave sentences unfinished, but you get your point across.
Yeah, it's about the flow, right? Not about getting every single word right.
Exactly. Same goes for learning a new language. Being understood is more important than being grammatically flawless.
That's really freeing to think about. Takes the pressure off. Lets us focus on enjoying the communication.
And another suggestion is embrace storytelling.
Ooh, I like that. Stories, they're like a universal way to connect.
Exactly. And they're awesome for practicing language skills in a way that's meaningful and engaging.
So instead of just drilling vocabulary lists, we could try using those words to tell a story.
Precisely. And the more personal the story, the more emotional, the better you'll remember it. And the more confident you'll be using those phrases.
It's like creating our own little language adventures.
Exactly. And when you share those stories, you're not only practicing, but also connecting with people.
Yeah.
And building understanding between cultures.
This is making me see language learning, it's so much more than just skills, right? It's about opening up to new ways of thinking, connecting with people, and expressing who we are.
Beautifully said. And that's what makes this journey so rewarding. It's not just the destination, it's how language can change us along the way.
I couldn't agree more. This deep dive into stop over-memorizing, it's really shifted how I think about language learning.
Yeah.
It's not about perfection, it's about connection, expression, and the joy of, finding your own voice.
And that's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely. So to everyone listening, ditch those flashcards, embrace the mistakes, and have fun with language. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into something fascinating. Until then, happy learning.